Welcome back to Parenting Shrink Wrapped. Sam here with Melissa. For our first of 4 episodes, we are calling Nature of the Beast. So throughout August, we will be talking about the back to school transition as it applies to different age groups. And we are starting with college. And in future episodes, we will talk about high school back to school, middle school back to school, and elementary back to school. But today's guest is going to talk to us today about what we can expect as we launch our kids off to college. And I am particularly excited to have this guest on because I went to college with her. I have known Dr. Kelly Wilcox before she was a doctor. We were just 18-year-old freshmen on the same hall playing field hockey together. And since then, Kelly has so many accolades to her name. And we're lucky because she's spent decades working in higher education. So let me introduce Dr. Kelly Wilcox. She's the Dean of Student Success at Haverford College, where she strives to foster advising relationships that feel accessible, welcome, personalized, meaningful. This is Kelly in a nutshell. As an undergraduate, which is where I met her, she studied political science and international relations at Swarthmore College, with a focus on East Asian studies. So, she's a total slouch. She completed her master's in psychological services at the University of Pennsylvania, as well as her doctorate in higher education administration. In addition to all of this learning she's done, she's also a certified life coach, ADHD coach, and health coach. So Kelly is like helper extraordinaire, and she brings to the table all of this expertise. So Kelly, welcome to Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We are so excited for this conversation.
As am I. Thanks so much for having me.
Can you begin by telling our listeners just a little bit about you and the story of how you ended up as the Dean for Student Success at Haverford College?
Absolutely. As you can tell from what I studied as an undergrad, there was a almost certainty that I would be heading to law school. And then I took a gap year to interact with 80 or 90 adolescent girls in England at a boarding school as the house mistress. And I actually fell in love with teaching, coaching, advising. And I think the core theme that has been there from that experience to where I am now is just they were students developing in transition, seeking a partner. And so I really tried to lean into what it means to bear witness, to meet students where they are, to truly, I would say, evolve as a professional from a helper to a partner, and what that really means to students. I went from that experience to coaching athletics, but coaching, mentoring, education, no matter what the title, has been there ever since. And so for the last 28 years, the population has been, that I've worked most closely with, has been college age students, which is just phenomenal. Talk about transition and an exciting partnership. So it's been a journey, but there's been themes throughout that I think have been very consistent, incredibly fulfilling, and never dull. I will say that.
Especially not in today, today's day and age, the college campuses are so entwined with what's happening. And this has been the case always. Like college kids are activists, right? So the college campuses are so entwined with what's happening nationally and globally. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not dull at the moment in either of those places.
It is not.
So as we are thinking, when we were envisioning this Nature of the Beast series, we kind of wanted to talk about what families and kids can expect as they begin this stage of schooling, right? So can you just kind of give us an overarching can you give us there was a little blip in the recording. Can you give us an overarching framework for what you see the incoming freshmen, as if you've got a family with an incoming freshman in college, what are some things that these families can expect and that the kids can expect? And we might interject with rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll start by saying ethically and professionally, every student's different, and you know your student best. But there have been certainly some themes that I have been able to bear witness to over the last few decades, particularly the last few years. And I think you touched on one of them, the word you used, connected. Are these students are connected to families and caregivers and loved ones and the world in a way that is very different than even just 5 years ago, vastly different from 10 or 15 years ago. And so that impacts the whole journey of the student, to be honest. Like, your student may be entering a community or college university where summer outreach is now possible via Zoom and new tools that weren't there before. So your students may be experiencing just right now, as of now, excitement, anxiety, because really the traditional orientation period has now been extended.
Mm,
And for many students, to be honest, with who may be learning in a second or third language, who may have learning differences, who may want to think ahead to resources, earlier contact can be really a blessing. For other students, this early contact may feel like high school graduation happened and now I have to switch gears and be this person and fit into this community in a certain way. And for some students, they might cause anxiety. So I would start there that the summer period before college can feel different for different students based on the type of outreach from that college or university.
well, and I
Mm.
think, Kelly, like I've heard a lot from a lot of young adults. Like, it's not uncommon for me to hear, like, I met my roommate through some group chat, or
Yes,
some group, social media site for the incoming class of such and such at such and such college.
yes.
Whereas I feel like before all the social media, relationships that can develop nowadays, like you either had a random roommate or you met
Mhm.
somebody face to face at an in-person orientation. And um
Yes,
during COVID, those in-person orientations weren't even an option for kids.
I agree completely. And I think that's part of what I was trying to get at in terms of they're already deciding who they want to be in this new community. And that may mean their profile on social media. People will start to be checking them out, their
Mhm.
roommate. Um, and for some students, we call it magical thinking sometimes that in my line of work, that they'll wake up tomorrow and everything will be fine. So, for example, we tell our students to fill out the housing questionnaire for who they are. You know, if they are a little on the messy side, or don't want to wake up early, or or want to study in a certain environment, answer for who you are, not who you want to be. But for many students who are seeking a clean start or want to put their best foot forward because of the level of scrutiny and attention and connectedness that was there, that is there now, that was not there. I met my roommate, by writing a letter and meeting at the mall beforehand. Um, it's a vastly different world. And so your students may be thinking about their who they are, what their values are, who they want to be as they enter this community, and it's exciting. It's going to be a 4, 5, 6 year period of immense growth, starting earlier. But the one downside is some students just feel like they don't have that carefree summer before starting college that maybe some of us or as parents were used to, if that makes sense. And there'll be some earlier emotions showing up.
What
So
do
this,
you suggest parents kind of do to help their, 18-year-old who's kind of
Hmm.
navigating this for the first time, Kelly? Because obviously the parents going through their own huge range of emotions,
Hmm.
and probably some grieving too that their kid is now officially like a young adult.
Yes.
Um, what do you suggest for the parents that are listening to this episode kind of do to help foster kind of that transition with like being honest on a form that like, yeah, your room's kind of a mess, and like, no, your dorm room's not going to look any different.
That's a great question. I think what I do love about the summer is that it does start to it allows the types of interactions that will be most helpful when the students start in person and are away from home, if that's the scenario for the student. By starting to ask the questions, what do you think about that? What have you learned about resources already? Um, what are you thinking about in terms of handling that or answering that question? So really shifting the onus of responsibility. of self-efficacy. A student has to believe that they have the tools and the ability to follow through, whether it is a housing questionnaire or in a month from now choosing classes, or month and a half from now or 2 months taking their first exam. So starting to build that, if it already has been part of the parenting style, I would start now. Because as a dean, what the students we are most worried about are the students who haven't navigated any challenges, and haven't had to figure it out on their own, if that makes sense. And so the summer is kind of a safety net, is kind of a experimental phase where you can really let the student, if summer outreach is an engagement as part of that college's engagement plan, start to practice some of that if it isn't already part of the high school experience.
So
And
I was hearing you when it was almost like the kid throws a like, mom, what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
How do I handle X? It's like they're throwing
Yep.
like a like a fireball your way, and instead of
Yes.
catching the fireball and putting out the flames, you just whew, catch it and throw it right back at them and be like,
Yep.
what do you think about that? Like is that
Yep.
kind of what you're advocating? Just
Yeah, throwing it back with some helpful framing questions that start to center agency, decision making, and action. And even if you know it might not go well, it's okay. These colleges are incredibly, hopefully, resourceful and supportive, and know that students are in transition.
and I was actually going to comment. It has nothing to do with like how bright your kid
Oh
is,
gosh, no.
because some of the brightest kids have never faced a challenge
Right.
because they've always succeeded. So your kid could be intellectually very, very bright, but suddenly doesn't know how to navigate kind of a new college system that they've never done before, or this might be the first time they flounder academically and stuff like that. And it's kind of, sometimes there's more learning in those
Mm-hmm.
missteps if they didn't happen already in high school, middle school, or whatever.
Agreed. And
I was
I tell
go
our
ahead, sorry.
first year students that everybody is navigating some type of transition. They're probably just not talking to you about it because they're trying to put off this certain persona. It might be financial for some. It might be homesickness for others. It might be academic for others. It might be um, undiagnosed learning difference for others. So everyone's navigating some type of transition that's challenging. That's just 30 years of doing this, I've seen it. Not everyone is as vocal about it, and so a parent really should expect that. Our typical course load is 4 classes. We tell first years, don't try to sign up for 5, because the invisible 5th class is transitioning to college, and there will be bumps along the way. You should expect them, and that's the zone of proximal development. We don't tell them that, but that it's their growth edge. If you're not meeting some challenges, you're not growing as much as really that you're capable of.
And I think there's a big amount of excitement that happens when kids kind of first hit college campus, and there's an
Mhm.
energy that comes with it, whether it's anxious or just excitement, and they're finally on their own for the first time if they did go away to school. But I also have seen kind of a dip that happens for a lot of students after that, like honeymoon period kind of wears
Mhm.
off in the first few weeks, month. Um, so, Kelly, what's your perspective on kind of what happens after that honeymoon wears off and they've been there for a couple weeks, but it's very real now?
Yes, agreed. And that I think you hit it on the head in terms of the timeline. Really, it's after they've had their orientation, they've chosen their classes, they're incredibly excited. Every class is going to go perfectly, but then they have the first exam, or things are a little, maybe it might not be what they expected on the hall. And so I'd say around mid to late October, early October, often students will again, the honeymoon period starts to wear off, and they're really navigating a new environment academically, socially, emotionally, financially, geographically. And hopefully they have started to put down roots and really have a sense of who the resources are on campus, have some peer support. Um, but some students are still, more than I've ever seen before, reaching out to the parents at that point. So that's where I go back to those initial questions. When they had the parent session during orientation, they mentioned this and this. Have you had a chance to connect with them or explore that? Or what have you learned? Or this sounds like something that happened in high school very similarly. Remember how you navigated that and you got through it? Like, it sounded to me like this might be similar. What do you think? Like, what feels similar that you have done before where you can get through this again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a guiding that has to happen, not a hand. There's some hand holding, but it's not you picking up the phone anymore and calling the high school or middle school guidance counselor. That
Yes,
is something you should not be doing for your
please
college
don't.
student.
Yes. And to be honest, what I want to say is the layer around this is FERPA. You know, students now have their academic records are protected.
Wait, FERPA is Family Education Right to Privacy Act, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so unless your child has signed a waiver, you know, their academic records are their private records, you know, and they can choose to share it. But that's a really, really, really hard transition for parents, and particularly those where every update, every assignment, there's a portal that is updated almost instantly for parents, as I understand it. I'm not in that realm yet, but and so it's a very stark transition for parents who absolutely understandably have been the advocate for students with IEPs or learning differences or other structured supports in the high school setting. Now that is governed, you know, privacy governed information that the student now has to usher. Like, they are expected to be the agent of their accommodations in that process as well. So there's this also layer of FERPA and HIPAA and privacy that on the legal side guides this, but also from a developmental side, the inner ball, this is really what's best for the student.
I used to get calls as a school counselor, a high school counselor, around mid-October from kids being like, I think I picked the wrong school. I think I'm going to transfer. And like, because I had a relationship with them and they hadn't found like, I want to be like, isn't there psych services at your school? Don't you have an advisor? Right. But they hadn't they hadn't put down roots and they didn't know their resources. So they would call the person they would have gone to last year. And
you're amazing. Of course they're going to call you.
And I would pick up, and like I would get these calls every year, a handful of them.
And I agree, and it's technology is wonderful, and students are more connected to high school friends and other like tethers to the high school, where it's a comfort. I get it, but it's easy to lean into those comforts and not lean into the in-person socialization at the college setting, if that makes sense.
And the growth really needs to happen at the college setting, not back with your high school counselor.
Right. Of course, you keep old friends and they're an incredible support system, and you want to add a layer of support at college. And so I've seen it take longer for students to find their people, if that makes sense. And so, yes, it may start in October and it might last the first year. And that's hard. It's heart-wrenching as a dean for a student to come in and say, can you help me understand how to make friends? This has been exacerbated by COVID, I'm not going to lie, through the pandemic. And, you know, we partner with the students. There are resources. And so everything is a little bit longer, a little bit more intense. And so I don't want to give an exact time frame, but just to know that those calls or texts are likely to come, and it's not the end of the world, and your child is not alone.
And Kelly, a lot of schools have like a parents' weekend, and it's usually in the fall. A lot of times it's centered around homecoming if it's a sports-related university or college. And I think it's really important for parents to kind of, if they are able to attend parents' weekend, to really foster the kid in that setting versus like a kid being like, oh, I can come home that weekend.
Agreed.
It's even if they're feeling homesick, like I think it's important to kind of push a little bit to kind of not kind of do a knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, we're going to transfer schools. Like, this isn't the right fit.
Right. Agreed. And, you know, it comes exact the right time. You're right. Like, it's right when the parents are really falling apart in terms of missing their children. And as the students are also, again, navigating probably their first grades. Maybe it wasn't what they saw in high school. Maybe they're comparing themselves to others, like, oh, but so-and-so has already found their people. I haven't found it yet. And so it's a really nice time. But those weekends, there's often, like I said, homecoming games, but there's also panels like, all right, let's refresh. What are the resources here? Because there's so much thrown at both parents, caregivers, and students during orientation. The cognitive load is overwhelming. So this is a time to like, okay, that was all theoretical. It got real. So now what are the resources? Who are these people? Putting faces to names. Say, hey, I just met your dean on this panel. She seemed really nice. Like, have you been to see her yet? That's great. That's a great question. You know, you don't have to wait till something's wrong. fostering mentors in your first year is huge. These are the people who are going to be your resources, but they're going to write you recommendation letters. They're going to think of you when an internship comes up. They're going to be who you go to talk to. Like, hey, I'm thinking about this class. Like, develop mentors. So we talk a lot about the peers, but faculty and staff, and look for them in unusual places. Some students say, the staff at the dining center are my people. Like, they are just feel like home to me. Like, that's who I go to talk to, and so it's going to be different for every student. It's not just who you would expect on paper, if that makes sense.
So a lot of this is, for the person transitioning into freshman year of college, but there's different transitions that are going to happen sophomore, junior, senior year of college as well. So I think there's a big shift that happens for freshman year of college. But what about parenting, the returning sophomore, junior, senior into college, because they're still in this multiple place. The brain development's still going on throughout college years. There's still a lot of parental involvement as well. What do you see kind of for the sophomore, junior, seniors, like moving into the later years of college?
Yep. I think a couple of things come to mind. I think having an honest conversation about what breaks and summers will look like. In the first year, many students want to come home for winter break. Some are like, oh, I'm going to go somewhere fun for spring break. And the parents are like, wait a minute, what? That's a good thing. But understanding that there's going to be, depending on the culture of the school, maybe pressure or messaging around internships and where they will be located, paid or unpaid. There's a lot there. There's a lot of pre-professional pressure on students that weren't there before. It might have been like, all right, the summer before senior year, let's think about an internship. Now they might feel pressure earlier. So really having an honest conversation about what family resources are, and understanding that any experience over a break, particularly sophomores, juniors, seniors, is still a learning experience. Maybe I've had students shadow a lawyer for the first time, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be a lawyer. Nothing against lawyers, but they just had no idea. Particularly, and I'll be honest, like certain cultures or for first-gen students, like I would say 80-90% identify being a lawyer or pre-health as a career. So I'd say for those rising sophomores, juniors, seniors, like their academic interests might change. And it's not just an academic shift, but it's a identity shift because they were the smart kid. They were the first gen. They were the pride and joy of their family. And maybe they don't want to be a doctor anymore. And so, again, it's meeting students where they are, recognizing there may be identity shifts happening on so many levels that may be familiar to you or different. And if it matches your family values, to support them in those transitions.
Yeah, I mean, I saw my pre-med classes like starting out in the biggest lecture hall on campus, and by the time you get to the higher level classes, you were in like a regular classroom size room. It drastically changed.
Agreed. And that's a good thing, if students are really finding their passion. I'd say in the summers, in the transitions for sophomores and juniors, also talking about additional opportunities is study abroad in the equation for the family and for the plans academically and personally. Living situations. Some students will choose to remain on campus and some will want to move off campus, and parents may have different feelings about that. And so, again, trusting your student to open up the space to ask them why. I would say the biggest competency or skill I'd say we're leaning into based on what we're seeing is just more time for reflection. So if so many students do what others are doing, where they think society or parents expect them to do, that if they can reflect and genuinely reflect and have good reasons and change their mind and incorporate sources that aren't all on social media, like that's a huge skill that I don't want to downplay. And so I'd say building in time to really listen and ask those powerful questions that can't be answered by yes or no for your student can really go a long way.
Kelly, what about kids who fail to develop some of those skills, like who are just late bloomers in some ways? And I'm sure you've seen this, like, and their parents are expecting on-time bloomers.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you advise parents to like navigate that situation where they're in college or they're approaching even the graduation of college, and it's like, okay, I still am not seeing some of these adulting skills I was hoping would fall into place?
Oh my gosh, Sam. Um, well, we know that prefrontal cortex develops differently, particularly even later for students who identify as biologically male. And so a lot of patience is involved. But there's also the realization that, maybe there was a certain sense that this major will mean a certain career where only, I think, 18% of students end up having a career in like their major. So they may experiment for a bit after college as well, and that's okay, and still land into a career that makes sense, because very few go right into a career or a profession or a job that actually matches what they
Yeah,
studied
especially in
undergrad.
today's job market.
Yeah. I would say, developmentally appropriate opportunities. For some students, I've seen study abroad be a game changer in terms of adulting a bit. I talked to a student yesterday. He's like, oh, I've had to live with someone for the first time and grocery shop and cook. And he was always brilliant, but he needed those adulting skills to really thrive at the next stage. Um, Other students have had an internship where it's 9 to 5, like, oh, wait a minute, this is what it means to have deadlines. And so, again, if it's maybe an internship with a friend who will be forgiving, but they're learning how to meet deadlines and to work in a professional setting. So I'd say stretch as much as possible, still have high expectations, but realistic expectations for your child. And I think you probably know if it's going to be a different timeline. And so I would say choose colleges and universities wisely. Like really high touch schools, a bit smaller on the smaller side, are going to have some more supports in place, and they're going to know your kid in a way that you hope to, where it's okay if they're on a slightly different timeline.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And I think a lot of families, we fall into comparison traps. Like it's so,
Yes.
and then this happens all the, and everyone's nodding when I said that. Like this isn't just college, but having worked in a high school for decades, I cannot tell you how many times, like around college conversations, the high school personnel had to remind parents to stop saying good college and start saying
Hmm.
college that's the right fit, right? Like we want,
Agreed.
like we're searching for your kid to get into a good college versus we're searching for your kid to find a college that is a good fit for what they need and who they are, right?
Agreed.
And good, the reason that term exists, good college, is because it's like I want the validation, or my kid wants a validation that they are worthy enough to be chosen by a highly selective school, right?
Yep.
And why do we need that? Status, comparison based, right? It's not about who the kid is necessarily. It's about what the label says about the kid or the family. And
Hmm.
that precedes the entrance into college, but I think that kind of thinking precedes the college search, right?
Agreed.
Just like, and it doesn't stop once you're into college. Then it becomes about like the job, the professional
Hmm.
trajectory, or what you're doing post college. If we can't as parents jump off of the comparison train, we're doing our children no services.
Mm-mm.
That's huge. Yes. Well said, Sam.
Well,
And
and Sam, your kids are at different schools.
quite different. They're different children, right? They're very different. I was just talking with a friend of mine who went to orientation with her youngest. Her oldest is at a large university in the South in a fraternity, and her youngest is going to a smaller, quirkier, like just sort of like, she said, I didn't see a boy in a polo shirt and khaki pants. I didn't see a girl wearing like a floral dress with like long blonde highlights, like at all. She said it was a bunch of like old hippies walking around town. And she goes, I think I might enroll. But like these were her two kids, and they'd chosen schools very different from one another. Um, the thing of it is, though, like I have the benefit of lots of knowledge around kid development
Hmm.
and also like academic environments. Like this
Yep.
is where I've worked professionally. I think it's not easy to get off of the comparison bus if this isn't your area of expertise, because we get our understanding of what's supposed to happen by like looking to other people's experiences.
And social media floods all of this. There's listings every year of the top this, the top that. Like,
Yeah.
it's in your face.
Do you find that, Kelly, as a dean? Do you find parents like coming in with like I don't know, a framework for how to measure their child's success or expectations they have for what their kid's experience is going to be in college, and then there's a little bit of a comeuppance, or they need a new framework?
Yeah, I work at a school with a high achieving students, so I think sometimes when child might navigate some academic bumps along the way that just has not been part of the family's experience, that could be challenging. And I've seen parents react to that in all different ways. Again, there's just no um, kind of one size fits all in regards to that. But something you said made me think of a talk that I heard a faculty member give just a month ago, and she said in high school, whether right or wrong, there's like one goal to get into a prestigious school.
Mm.
And what I love, Melissa, as you're saying, there's lots of lists. And I love that there's new lists, like for the types of schools, not just the top party school, but the quirky, that students can find the best fit for them. And as a professor, she noticed that once they get into college, it's like Costco. There's a gazillion choices. And as she said, there's temptations at every turn to draw your attention. At Costco, your money, but in college, your attention and time. And so understanding that there's going to be a lot of choice. So to your question, Melissa, like, yes, they're choosing this college before the first year, but then the sophomore year, like, they're going to be choosing your major, and they're not used to having a lot of choice because the goal in high school was clear, like, get into the best college, that others might say. And then what? Now they have all these choices at every corner and a lot of temptations without as many kind of guardrails around them. And then junior year, it's like, oh, what internship do I do? So there's a lot more choice. And so I've seen a bit more, to your point, Sam, adulting in terms of just paralysis, because they didn't have as many choices in high school, if that makes sense, particularly if the curriculum was set or they just knew from birth what college they'd be going to. And now they're faced with choices and temptation at almost every turn. And that can be overwhelming for some. And that may not even be related to development. It's just the nature of the environment that they're now in.
I think I remember talking to this was a colleague of mine years ago, and as I was leaving education, as I was leaving my position as a school counselor, and I opened Teen Savvy Coaching, she said, because her kids are a little older than mine, she said, I think it's also really necessary that we need coaching for parents whose kids are in their 20s, like who are in the young adult phase, because this is really hard. Like, it's hard,
Really hard,
because of all those choices you just said. It's like there's so many different pathways.
You can't pick for them. You can't tell them, like,
No.
this is the major you should do, or, this is the career you should have. I mean, that won't necessarily be successful.
No. And it's hard, just as when they were younger or in high school, I think of the book How to Raise an Adult. It's a great book. Yeah, letting your child make a choice, even if it's not the one you would make, and even if there may be some unintended consequences at the other end, that doesn't change when they're in college. And you just have to be that safe space for them to come back to, and ask those guiding questions, and then remind them of their strengths. Support them as their values and identities continue to evolve. And it might be confusing, like, wait a minute, yesterday, it's okay. They're really trying on a lot of new identities while they're at college. And the students I see the most successful really have a sense of their values, to be honest, like that true north, before they even arrive at college. And that's just really cool to see. Like, everything kind of shifts around that, but that's just a nice compass for them as they navigate all these choices.
That's so valid. One of the courses I have a parent membership, and one of the courses in there is parenting from your highest values. And the reason it's in there, the reason I put it in there is because when you can parent from your highest values, and narrate that for your child or as your kids growing up, you pass along how to make values-based decisions to your kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love that's yay, that you've just validated that's something that you see as a predictor of success, beyond high school. Kelly, this has been great. And I know that our listeners, if you're listening, you can hear Kelly's expertise, her patience, as well as her firm belief in kids' ability to grow, and young people's ability to grow. If people want to reach out to you, because you're the Dean of Student Success at Haverford College, but you also do private work with folks on helping kids and their families navigate this time period.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about Wilcox Coaching and Consulting.
Sure, absolutely. So I love student contact, and I love that I have some of it at work, and I love that I have even more of it in this coaching and consulting role. And so I've partnered with students who are navigating executive functioning. You mentioned, I'm an ADHD coach, but I think the life coaching is just such a useful framing for students at all ages. So I've worked with high school, college, and graduate students as they really think about the academic experience, but within a larger context. If that's just the only thing the students are considering, you miss an opportunity to really take a step back. What is this growth? What are these learning strategies? What are these academic interests mean within that student's larger trajectory, within their value system, within their strengths? And so I love working with students in terms of test-taking strategies, executive functioning, self-awareness, and a lot of it sometimes just gaining some independence and being that prefrontal cortex for a little bit until they are able to strengthen it themselves.
Awesome. Well, we will put Wilcox Coaching and Consulting and the contact info for how folks can reach out to you in the show notes. So please check that out if you're interested in connecting with Kelly. But Dr. Kelly Wilcox, thank you so much for joining us on Parenting Shrink Wrapped. And to our listeners, thank you always for raising the next generation of world changers. We love you. We love your kids.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride called parenthood here at Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We hope today's episode gave you some useful tools and maybe even a few laughs to help you navigate the twists and turns of raising teens and kids.
Remember, parenting is a journey, not a destination. And no matter where you are on the road, we're here to help you stay on course. Whether it's monumental meltdowns, teenage turmoil, or just the everyday chaos, you don't have to travel this path alone.
So until next time, keep your seatbelt fastened, your sense of humor intact, and your eyes on the road. We'll be back soon with more compassionate conversations and practical strategies to support you and your family.
Don't forget to subscribe to Parenting Shrink Wrapped wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you've enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review and share it with a friend.
If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, feel free to send us an email at parentingshrinkwrapped@gmail.com.
Until we meet again, take care and enjoy the ride.